laughing at the sun, sailing with the moon. Laughing at the sun, sailing with the moon.
Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Faulkner, along with Josh Atkinson and Mimi Faulkner, who are not in the camera yet. They will be here soon. And we will be presenting your service today. Steve and Lynn Israel are providing technical assistance here, while Robin Perry, Noelle McClooney, and Lisa Merrill Price are helping from home. Thank you so much for tuning in today for our live streaming service in light of the social distancing needed for reducing the spread of COVID-19. We're glad that we can keep in touch and support our community even if we can't be together in person. You're going to want to move the camera a little. If you'd like an order of service, please look in the comments on the video or see the email sent this morning. We greet you today as you join us in a wider search for truth and purpose. In this quest, may we encounter one another with open hearts and minds. May we inspire each other to consider new questions and seek deeper meaning. And may we cultivate wisdom and compassion. Let all who enter this place see a welcome face, hear a kind word, and find comfort in this community. May all that we do and say here today help us to be a force for positive change in the world. And so please take a moment to think of all your friends at MVUUC. Greet them with a comment on Facebook, and remember that you can still reach out to them via email, phone, social media, or video chat. Physical distancing does not need to mean emotional distancing. Let us support one another. Because there is a delay in the video broadcast, I encourage people to begin emailing announcements as well as joys and concerns now. Services at mvuuc.org, or the information on the Facebook comment. Visitors, as we are diverse with varying interests and beliefs, our services are varied in format and topic. We encourage you to attend or view several services to gain a good understanding of our congregation. If you'd like to receive our weekly email newsletter, please news@mvuuc.org. MVUUC remains committed to supporting our members in this difficult time of social distancing. For that reason, we are coordinating assistance with groceries, phone calls, and other needs. If this sounds like something helpful to you, please send an email to sac@mvuuc.org and what kind of assistance you would like to request. Okay, now is the time for announcements. So we will see what we received via email and in the Facebook comments.
So at this time, we have one announcement from our President Noel McClooney. Our annual pledge campaign has begun. Please send your email on April 20. Please send your email on April 22nd for the pledge packet. Board members will be reaching out to follow up on any questions. Please by May 5th. That's. I'm seeing if there are any other announcements. No, that's all that we have right now for announcements. The chalice will be lit today by Mimi Faulkner. So please join me in reading the words for the chalice lighting that appear as a comment on the Facebook Live video or in the order of service, which you can access via a link in the comments. Light this chalice of our highest nations and to inspire us to bring our gift and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community.
April is Poetry Month, and I can think of or time to consider the power of poetry. The myriad ways that poetry bears witness, provokes, and agitates, the ways in which poetry is in dialogue with current events and languages things that are seemingly impossible to put into language. Rita Dove said, poetry is another way of singing. Language is where a story. Atkinson writes of how poetry can language things that other kinds of writing cannot. Words can be a blanket, slightly suffocating, or a wall dividing. The exception is poetry, which illuminates, touches down, and continues along filaments and in bright spots, or curves around us, or come back in the back door. Poetry is a way to describe and distill, but remain porous, oxygenated. Poetry lets the light in. In short, poetry is more important than ever. Of course, this does not mean that all poetry is heavy, and so I'm going to begin with some poetry satire from McSweeney's. And as I read some of these rewritten lines, I want you to see if you can recognize some of the original poems. And so here's famous lines of poetry revised for the age of coronavirus by Dave Pell. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled. Duh. I wandered lonely as a cloud, as the CDC advised. We happy few, we band of brothers, for he today that shares his Zoom with me shall be my brother. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown, but longed for still, another night of Netflix and chill. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach when feeling out of sight. Better yet, actually be out of my sight. Do not go gentle into that good night without first purelling. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. Fortunately, I remained more than 6 feet away. Oh, Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every rack. The prize we sought is won. Invite me on another cruise, and I swear to God, I'll run. There's a stake in your fat black heart, and the villagers never liked you. They are dancing and stamping on you. They always knew it was you who coughed in the produce aisle. Is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream? Still stocking toilet paper? I'll take a ream. I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox. Alexa, order more plums. And now we're going to interlude. Mimi Faulkner is going to play Reflection number 1. Thank you. And so now for our reflection. Poetry is reading, writing, performing poetry can be an active response to social inequities. Thus, writing, performing, and publishing poetry is important political activity. Jay Preeney wrote that poets' work is politically powerful because the language of poetry provides deep understanding in ways that other writing does not. Many poets engage politics through their writing, bypassing stifling social structures. Poets represent marginalized groups and positions in nuanced, sensitive, and myriad ways. As Fisher argued, the political task of poetry is a visionary one, the work of making way for new worlds and words. Poetry confronts social structures to engage audiences and activate poetry's political potential. Thus, poetry engages a political voice. In an interview on PBS NewsHour, poet Ocean Vuong argued that reading poetry is an act of political resistance. Thus, our lyric poetry, our narrative poetry, and our poetry of personal experience is a political act. The act of writing, reading, and performing our poetry is political. And here's what Ocean Vuong had to say. It was particularly talking about the election cycle of 2016. The reading of poetry is in itself an act of political resistance to the mainstream, particularly in this election cycle where there is this great anxiety for certainty. What is your position? What is your stance? Why are you flip-flopping? There's an anxiety of certainty and power and boldness. But poetry acknowledges the true complexity of what it means to be human, which is that nothing is ever certain. Continuing in that, Jay Preeney writes that poetry matters in part because of its potential for political expression. It is important for poets to read the world around them and to respond to that world in their own fashion. Not in slogans that can be printed on posters or slapped onto bumpers, right? But in urgent, astute ways that reflect the injustice and immorality everywhere, in evidence, even sad abundance. At their best, poets suggest useful ways to think and feel about these things and to picture them clearly. Poets do not offer solutions, however. What they do offer is a depth of understanding and a language adequate to the vision they summon. And so I'm arguing that poetry taps into this universal through radical subjectivity. And so it's the poet's use of personal experience that creates something larger from the particular. The concrete specifics become universal when the audience relates to, embodies, or experiences the work as if it were their own. Poetry that gives voice to gendered, raced, classed, and embodied experiences can be a form of poetic consciousness raising, a distinct form of political activity. As Ryan notes, poetic discourse is quintessentially a site of personal and ideological struggle within the ongoing cultural dialogue. I'm going to share a poem now that I wrote in response to some headlines in January, claiming that 47 is the saddest age of all. 47 is the saddest age of all. I don't need this research report to tell me what I already know. The last years of this insufferable decade are a Sisyphean hill-shaped curve of illness and obligation, and I am no mountain climber. The world is burning while I spend my nights sweating in the roller rink of perimenopause, and I can't find my skates, I can't sleep, and my dad is cleaning out the basement, directing grandkids from his wheelchair so we won't have to when the aneurysm does the work alcohol, sugar, and middle-class dreams began. No longer sentimental about the just in case, he discards rusted coffee cans filled with bolts and washers, the bittersweet orange basketball hoop from the 80s, kitchen gadgets wearing the dust robes of obsolescence, the fitted aqua silverware holder from another dishwasher, tarnished brass candlesticks, and I take out trash and spend hours trying to polish back into my childhood when this unhappiness curve began. Try melatonin, my doctor urged. Try pot butter, my student whispered. Too sleepless to find the ladder to the next level, I tried baking away my depression. I tried calling my senators. I take my anxiety for a run until my heel spurs stab. I drink my loneliness during happy hour until the bourbon burns. I lean into the rage and not the yoga because I am outlying the curve. Thus, the personal is poetry. Poetry matters. Poetry of personal experience is vital. Poetry has the power to highlight slippery identity negotiation processes and present more nuanced views of marginalized and stigmatized identities, demonstrate embodied experience, and to be social research that advocates for social change. Perini tells us that as a language adequate to our experience, poetry allows us to articulate matters of concern in such a way that they become physical, tangible, and immediate. Indeed, the finest poems become instructable objects in their own right, taking on a life beyond the immediate circumstances of the poet to create them. Personal is poetry. And here's a poem for Sylvia Plath after The Applicant. The interview. Can you separate lights from darks, gabardine from linen, too much bother? I cannot care if your hands warm like Georgia hot springs, capable of sparing my feet the Sisyphean walk over broken crayons and wine glasses, the laundry room of dog and dust. Do you know how to make coffee? Float a rip of cream in my capacious cup. Forget the sugar and call my name in accent auf Deutsch, but speak only ambition. Patch noise of domestic bliss with a steady pour and 2 clinks of ice? Will you wait for the repairs, bury the hamster with the holy blanket behind the dying holly? Never mind if you dig too shallow. I want a wife too. Poetry can help us shape lives in ways that we want to live. We create and tell stories that advocate social justice and change. Rita Dove considers poetry to work through poet use of empathy and readers' recognition of themselves and their words in verse. Dove says, poets are sensitive to their surroundings and the world where they live. Speaking out is almost avoidable. That can sustain people because it reads a poet's descriptions of an experience for which they had no words before. It again offers the reassurances of telling them that they are not alone. Poets reveal inequitable social conditions in education, immigration, politics, and their local communities. They use poetry to question inequality and show how poetry can be a personal and a political response. The political task of poetry is making way for new worlds and words. Some poets like Rita Dove and Naomi Nye argue that art, and poetry in particular, are important to deny tyranny in all forms. So in conclusion, we can use poetry to reflect on power equities, to make our personal experiences part of the critique, to realize the potential power in poetry as political discourse and witness. And before we begin with our second musical interlude, I want to send a reminder that if you have joys, concerns, or milestones you'd like to share, please begin posting them as a comment on the Facebook or email them to services@mvuuc.org. And now we're going to have the musical interlude by Mimi Faulkner entitled Reflection Number 2.
So this is Self-Portrait as Exit Wounds by Ocean Vuong, the poet that referenced by Sandra earlier. Instead, let it be the echo to every footstep, drowned out by rain, cripple like air, like name, flung onto a sinking boat, splash the kapok's bark, through hot and iron of a city trying to forget, bones beneath its sidewalks, then through the refugee camp, sick with smoke half-sung hymns, a shack rusted, black and lit, Ba Nuag's last candle, the hog faces we held in our hands and mistook for others. Let it enter a room illustrated with snow, furnished only with laughter, bread and mayonnaise raised to cracked lips as testament to a triumph no one recalls. Let it brush the newborn's flushed cheeks as he lifted his father's arms, a wreath with fish gut and Marlboros. Everyone hearing as another brown gook crumbles under John Wayne's M16. Vietnam on the screen. Let it slide to the ears, clean like a prompt before piercing the poster of Michael Jackson glistening over the couch, into the supermarket where a Hapa woman is ready to believe every white man possessing her nose is her father. May it sing briefly inside her mouth before laying her down between jar of tomato and blue boxes of pasta, the deep red apple rolling from her palm, then into the prison cell where her husband sits, staring at the moon until he's convinced the last wafer God refused him. Let it hit his jaw like a kiss. We've forgotten now. Sorry. Let it hit his jaw like a kiss. We've forgotten how to keep one another. Hissing back to 68. Ha Long Bay. The sky laced with fire. The sky only the dead look up to. May it reach the grandfather, the pregnant farm girl in the back of his army jeep. His blonde hair flicking in napalm blasted wind. Let it pin him down to dust where his future daughters lie. Fingers blistered with salt and orange. Let them tear open his olive fatigues. Clutch that name hanging from his that name they press to their tongues to read the word live, live, live. For nothing else, let me weave this death beam the way a blind woman stitches a flap of skin back to her daughter's rib. Yes, let me believe I was born and tuck back this rifle smooth and slick like a Charlie, like the footsteps of ghosts misted through rain as I lower myself between the sights and pray that nothing moves.
And Ocean Vuong coincidentally won a MacArthur Genius Grant. So some closing words. Karen Crego, who is the current laureate of Missouri, muses on the pleasure of writing poetry, but also how poetry can take us to unexpected places. Crego says, writing poetry brings one distinct pleasure. It's the satisfaction of having written. Beyond this satisfaction, though, a feeling that's downright exhilarating. And these are the moments when you've written the poem and the poem writes back. You began the piece and improbably you just something, some insight you didn't plant there, or at least not intentionally. I found dense layers of imagery in a poem that I didn't calculate. They just sort of showed themselves upon inspection. My own poems floor me sometimes, not because they're amazing poems, although there are some that I'm very proud of, but because they seem to operate independently of my consciousness. They have their own consciousness. And that's a weird and breathtaking discovery on a printed page. Sometimes we think we're writing a question and we're actually writing the answer to that question. Sometimes we write of our fury or frustration, and peace peaks through. Sometimes we're just writing along the best we can when the poem says, let's show her what we can do. This is the thrill of it, when a poem is a horse that can take us into astonishing wilderness, but then knows exactly how to bring itself home. And now Mimi's going to help extinguish the chalice, and you can read the word extinguishing the chalice on the Facebook feed and in the order of service. Oh, here, hold on.
Ready. May this light continue to spread warmth and hope, and may it warmth grown cold with indifference.
We moved the offertory to the end of service because when you click on the page link provided in the Facebook Live video comments section, you may lose your connection to our live feed or on phone or tablet. We're still counting on your pledge payments and donations to help sustain the investigation that is so important to all of us. Supporting our efforts to be a gift of love, truth, justice, and service. So please click on the link and be sure to select the correct designation on the drop-down box when you do donate. After the service, please feel free to continue chatting with others in the comments on Facebook or join us for a virtual coffee hour. You'll just click on the link in the comments on Facebook or in your order of service to be able to video chat with others. Or instead, you may call in via the provided phone number. And so, a closing poem for you by Danette Smith. Not an elegy for Mike Brown. I am sick of writing home, but bring the boy, his new name, his same old body, ordinary, black, dead thing. Bring him, and we will mourn until we forget what we are mourning. And isn't that what being black is about? Not the joy of it, but the feeling you get when you are looking at your child, turn your head, then poof, no more child. That feeling, that's black. Think, once a white girl kidnapped, and that's the Trojan War. Later, up the block, I got shot, and that was Tuesday. Are we not worthy of a city of ash, of 1,000 ships launched because we are missed? Always something deserves to be burned. It's never the right thing nowadays. I demand a war to bring the dead boy back, no matter what his name is this time. I at least demand a song. A song will do just fine. Look at what the Lord has made above Missouri, sweet smile.